The council chamber reeked of old wood and older prejudice. Irina stood in the center of the circular room, her hands clasped before her to hide their trembling, while 12 pairs of eyes judged her from the elevated benches surrounding her, like wolves circling wounded prey. Elder Rothgar's voice echoed off the stone walls, each word a nail in her coffin. You have evaded this responsibility long enough, Irina. Your bloodline is too valuable to remain unclaimed. The pack requires strength, and your union with powerful wolves will secure our future. If only you knew, Irina thought, her jaw tightening. Beneath her loose tunic, barely noticeable yet, the slight swell of her belly pressed against the fabric. 3 months along, and so far her secret remained hers alone. The father, a stranger whose face haunted her dreams, whose touch had set her soul on fire during one reckless night at the summer gathering, was gone, vanished before dawn like smoke. She'd been foolish, reckless, and now she carried the consequences while her pack treated her like a broodmare to be auctioned. "Bring them in," Hrothgar commanded. The chamber doors groaned open, and Dane entered first, his broad shoulders filling the doorway. His twin brother Marcus followed a half-step behind, their synchronized footfalls an unsettling reminder of how they moved through life, together, always competing, always hungry for more. Both had their father's harsh features and their mother's calculating eyes. They flanked her, standing close enough that their body heat pressed against her like walls closing in. "The choice is simple," Hrothgar continued, his weathered hands gripping his ceremonial staff. "Dane or Marcus, both are strong warriors, both carry alpha blood. Either would elevate your position and secure your place in Silver Hollow. Choose tonight, and the mating ceremony will occur at the next full moon." Irina's stomach churned, and not from the pregnancy. The casual way they discussed her future, as if she were property to be distributed, set her teeth on edge. She'd grown up in this pack, had bled for these wolves, had lost her parents defending their borders. And this was her reward, being bartered between brothers who looked at her like a prize to be won. "No," she said quietly. The word hung in the air like the moment before lightning strikes. Hrothgar's bushy eyebrows drew together. "What did you say?" "I said no." Irina lifted her chin, meeting his gaze directly. "Protocol be damned. I won't choose. I'm not a trophy for them to fight over, and I won't be used to settle whatever power struggle you're orchestrating." Dane's hand shot out, gripping her elbow. "Don't be stupid, Irina. This is an honor." She wrenched her arm free, stepping away from both brothers. The movement made her head spin slightly, the ever-present fatigue of early pregnancy pulling at her bones. "An honor? You mean a transaction. I know what this is really about. My mother's bloodline, the connections to the Eastern Pacts, the alliances you want to forge. I'm just the bridge you're trying to build your ambitions on." Marcus moved closer, his voice dropping to what he probably thought was a seductive purr. "We could make you happy, Irina. Powerful. You'd want for nothing. Except freedom. Except choice." She looked around the council, seeing no allies in their faces. Her father's old friends looked away. The female council member, Maya, studied her hands. They'd all already decided. This hearing was just theater. And what happens when you two eventually tear each other apart fighting over who really owns me, because that's what this is. Ownership. Hrothgar slammed his staff against the stone floor, the crack echoing like a judge's gavel. "Enough. Your arrogance borders on disrespect, girl. You have 3 days to decide, or we will decide for you. And if you continue to refuse, you will be cast out. Exiled. No pack, no protection, no territory. Is that what you want?" The threat landed like a physical blow. Exile was a death sentence for most wolves. The wilderness between pack territories was dangerous, filled with rogues and worse things. A lone wolf rarely survived a month, but staying meant surrendering everything she was. Irina's hand drifted unconsciously to her stomach, stopping herself just before the gesture became obvious. She had more than herself to think about now. The life growing inside her deserved better than being raised in this cesspool of manipulation, claimed by a father who wasn't its sire, used as another pawn in pack politics. 3 days, she whispered. Hrothgar smiled, mistaking her capitulation for submission. Wise choice. Council dismissed. As the elders filed out, their robes rustling like predators through grass, Dane and Marcus remained. They stood on either side of the doorway, blocking her exit, their expressions mirror images of smug satisfaction. I'll court you properly, Dane said, his voice carrying the warmth of a wolf circling a trapped rabbit. You'll see why I'm the better choice. I'll let my actions speak, Marcus countered, stepping forward. When you're ready to choose, you'll know it's me. Irina pushed past them, her shoulder connecting hard with Dane's chest. She didn't trust herself to speak, didn't trust the scream building in her throat to emerge as anything but a howl of rage and despair. The night air hit her face like a slap as she emerged from the council hall. Above, the moon hung full and red, a blood moon, the old wolves called it, a time of change and violence, of endings and terrible beginnings. She walked through the pack grounds, past the communal fire where wolves gathered in the evening, past the training yards where she'd learned to fight, past the small cottage where her parents had raised her before a rogue attack had stolen them from the world. No one stopped her. No one called out in support. The message was clear. Conform or be cast out. By the time Irina reached her small dwelling at the edge of the pack grounds, her decision had crystallized like ice in her chest. She couldn't stay. Wouldn't stay. Whatever dangers waited in the wilderness, they couldn't be worse than slowly suffocating under the weight of everyone else's expectations. She packed quickly. Clothes, a few provisions, the silver bracelet her mother had given her. Dawn was still hours away. The blood moon would hide her escape, and by the time they noticed she was gone, she'd be beyond Silver Hollow's borders. As she slipped into the forest, following deer trails she'd known since childhood, Irina didn't look back. Behind her lay everything she'd ever known. Ahead lay uncertainty and danger and probable death, but ahead also lay freedom, and for her child, she'd brave any darkness. The forest floor rose up to meet her face, and Irina barely managed to throw her hands out in time to catch herself. Her palms scraped against rocks and pine needles, fresh pain lancing through skin already torn and bleeding from her desperate flight through the wilderness. 3 days. She'd lasted 3 days alone, which was probably 2 days longer than anyone in Silver Hollow expected. Pride would have warmed her if she wasn't so cold, so tired, so hungry. The pregnancy sapped her strength faster than she'd anticipated. Every wolf instinct screamed at her to find shelter, to protect the precious life growing inside her, but her body was failing. She'd crossed into neutral territory sometime yesterday. She thought it was yesterday. Time had become fluid, marked only by the sun's journey overhead and the constant gnawing in her belly. Irina tried to push herself up, but her arms gave out. The ground smelled of moss and earth, and the promise of an ending. Her vision blurred at the edges, dark spots dancing like crows circling carrion. Not like this, she thought desperately. Please, not like this. The baby. The rumble of vehicles cut through her fading consciousness. Engines, multiple ones, powerful and close. Through the gathering darkness, headlights pierced the forest gloom like predator eyes. She should run, should hide, should do anything except lie here, helpless and exposed. But her body had nothing left to give. The engines cut off. Car doors opened and closed with solid, expensive-sounding thumps. Footsteps approached, boot heels striking the ground with the confidence of those who'd never known fear. "Sir, there's—" a male voice called out. "I see her." That voice, deep as thunder, smooth as whiskey, carrying an authority that made her wolf instincts snap to attention even through her exhaustion. She knew that voice. Impossible. But she knew it, had heard it whispering promises in the dark, had felt it rumbling against her skin as strong hands rolled her over, gentle despite their obvious power. Irina forced her eyes open. The face above her stole what little breath she had left. Devastating was too mild a word. Brutal beauty, sharp cheekbones and a jaw that could have been carved from granite, dark hair that fell across his forehead, and eyes like molten gold that widened in recognition the moment they met hers. "You," he breathed, and the single word carried the weight of months of searching, of longing, of incomplete sentences that finally found their ending. The mate bond snapped into place with the force of a lightning strike. Irina felt it crash through her system. The recognition, the rightness, the overwhelming certainty that this male was hers and she was his, and everything else was just noise. It burned through her veins like holy fire, igniting every nerve ending, chasing away the cold and exhaustion with primal, unshakable knowing. The stranger from the summer gathering, the father of her child, the one who'd touched her soul and disappeared. He was the Alpha King, Jet. She remembered his name now, remembered hearing it whispered with reverence and fear throughout the gathering. Remembered not caring about titles or power when his hands had mapped her body like claiming new territory. Jet, she managed, his name falling from her lips like a prayer or a curse. Something feral flashed through his golden eyes. His hands cupped her face with devastating gentleness, thumbs brushing her cheekbones as if confirming she was real. "I've been searching for you. Everywhere. You vanished. And I..." His voice cracked slightly, revealing the raw emotion beneath his controlled exterior. "You're mine, my mate." "Sir." Another male appeared at Jet's shoulder, tall and broad with the bearing of a warrior. His dark eyes assessed Irina with quick efficiency. "We have incoming. Silver Hollow warriors, 6 of them, approaching fast from the east." Jet's expression went from reverent to absolutely deadly in the space between heartbeats. He stood in one fluid movement, lifting Irina against his chest as if she weighed nothing. The casual display of strength should have frightened her. Instead, she felt safe for the first time in days. "Cormac?" Jet said to the other male, his voice dropping into tones that could freeze blood. "Standard protection formation. If they so much as look at her wrong, I want their throats on the ground." "Understood." Cormac whistled sharply, and more warriors melted from the shadows. Huge males with the predatory grace of elite soldiers, forming a wall between Irina and the approaching wolves. Through the trees, she saw them. Silver Hollow warriors in their ceremonial leathers, Dane and Marcus leading the group. The twins' faces lit with triumph when they spotted her. "There she is!" Dane called out, his voice carrying false concern. "Thank the moon. Irina, you had us so worried. Come, we'll bring you home." "She's not going anywhere with you." Jet's words cut through the night like a blade. He moved forward, still holding Irina against his chest, his warriors parting to let him through, then closing ranks behind him. "She's under my protection now." Marcus stepped forward, recognition widening his eyes. "Alpha King, we mean no disrespect, but this is pack business. Irina is one of ours. She's unwell, confused. We've come to bring her home where she belongs. She belongs with me." The sheer possessive dominance in those 4 words made every wolf present freeze. This wasn't negotiation. This was declaration. Claim. Irrevocable and absolute. Irina felt the power radiating from Jet's body, felt the way the very air seemed to vibrate with his authority. The Alpha King wasn't just a title. It was a force of nature, and she was caught in its eye. Dane's hand dropped to the knife at his belt. "Look, we don't want trouble. Then leave. Jet's eyes flashed with light that was distinctly inhuman. While you still can. While I'm still feeling generous enough to let you walk away. She's supposed to choose between us, Marcus protested, his voice rising. It's pack law. She has to. The only thing anyone has to do right now is shut their mouth before I shut it for them. The lethal promise in Jet's tone left no room for doubt that he could and would make good on the threat. This female is my mate. My fated mate. The bond has claimed us both. If you think your petty pack politics override that, you're even more stupid than you smell. Irina felt his heart hammering against her side where she pressed against his chest. For all his outward control, Jet was barely leashed violence, seconds away from tearing them apart. You're making a mistake, Dane said, backing up a step despite his brave words. Silver Hollow won't forget this insult. Jet smiled, and it was the most terrifying expression Irina had ever seen, all teeth and promise of pain. Good. I want them to remember. Remember that I consider you and your brother my enemies. Remember that Irina is mine, now and always, and remember that if anyone from your pathetic pack comes near what belongs to me again, I won't just destroy the messengers. I'll burn Silver Hollow to the ground and salt the earth where it stood. The silence that followed was absolute. Then Cormac stepped forward, his hand on his weapon. The Alpha King has spoken. Leave. Now. The Silver Hollow warriors retreated, Dane and Marcus shooting venomous looks over their shoulders. But they went, because even twin alpha-blooded males weren't fool enough to challenge a king. When they disappeared into the trees, Jet's rigid posture finally softened. He looked down at Irina, and the tenderness that replaced the violence in his expression made her throat tight. I've got you, he murmured, his thumb stroking her cheek. You're safe now. I promise you're safe. Irina wanted to argue, wanted to explain that she couldn't drag him into her problems, that she brought complications he couldn't imagine, but exhaustion crashed over her in waves, the adrenaline draining away and leaving only bone-deep fatigue. Her eyes drifted closed despite her best efforts. The last thing she felt was Jet's arms tightening around her, protective and possessive, as he carried her toward the waiting vehicles and whatever future lay beyond. The journey to Blackstone Keep took hours, though Irina drifted through most of it in a haze of semi-consciousness. She registered the rumble of the vehicle's engine, the warm weight of Jet's jacket draped over her like a blanket, and most clearly, the solid presence of the Alpha King beside her. His hand rested on her shoulder, thumb tracing absent circles that sent warmth spiraling through her exhausted body. Each time she stirred, his voice would murmur reassurances. Sleep. You're safe. I've got you. And she'd sink back under, trusting him in a way that should have terrified her, but instead felt as natural as breathing. When consciousness finally returned fully, dawn light was streaming through tall windows that stretched nearly to a vaulted ceiling. Irina blinked, disoriented by the massive four-poster bed she occupied, by the silk sheets that whispered against her skin, by the sheer opulence of the chamber that surrounded her. This wasn't a guest room. This was a statement of power and wealth that made Silver Hollow's council chambers look like a hunting cabin. She sat up carefully, one hand instinctively moving to her belly. Still there. Still safe. Relief made her dizzy for a moment. Clean clothes had replaced her torn, filthy ones, soft leather pants and a tunic in deep emerald that fit perfectly despite her slight pregnancy curves. Someone had bathed her while she slept, had tended the cuts on her hands and feet, had brushed her hair until it fell in dark waves over her shoulders. The intimacy of being cared for while unconscious should have alarmed her. Instead, she felt cherished. A knock at the door made her tense. "Come in," she called, her voice hoarse from disuse. Cormac entered, carrying a tray laden with food. The beta's expression was carefully neutral, but his eyes held something that might have been respect. "Alpha King requests your presence at breakfast, but thought you might prefer eating here first." You've been asleep for 14 hours. 14 hours? Irina's stomach chose that moment to growl audibly, and Cormac's mouth twitched in what might have been amusement on a less controlled face. Where am I exactly? She asked, as he set the tray on a table near the windows. Blackstone Keep, the king's personal fortress, heart of the Northern Territories. Cormac gestured toward the windows. Your chamber overlooks the Eastern Valley. The king thought you'd appreciate the sunrise. Irina moved to the windows, and her breath caught. The fortress sat atop a mountain, commanding views that stretched for miles. Pine forests rolled like dark green waves toward distant peaks, still capped with snow. A river cut through the valley below, silver in the morning light. It was savage and beautiful, untamed in a way that made her wolf sing with recognition. It's magnificent, she whispered. The king will be pleased you think so. Cormac moved toward the door, then paused. He wanted me to tell you that you're free to explore anywhere you wish. This isn't a prison. You're not a prisoner. You're... He seemed to search for the right word. You're the Alpha King's mate, which makes you the most protected wolf in 3 territories. After he left, Irina approached the food with trembling hands. Fresh fruit, warm bread, eggs cooked with herbs, smoked fish, and rich cheese. The pregnancy hunger roared to life, and she ate with an efficiency that would have mortified her mother. But her child needed the nourishment, and her body screamed for fuel after days of near starvation. When she finally emerged from the chamber, the corridor outside took her breath away. Blackstone Keep wasn't just a fortress, it was a work of art. Stone walls were carved with intricate wolf motifs, torches burned in iron sconces despite the daylight, and thick carpets muffled her footsteps. She followed the sound of voices, letting instinct guide her through the massive structure. The informal dining hall she discovered could have held 50 wolves comfortably, but currently only seated a dozen. They all looked up when she entered, conversations dying mid-sentence. Jet sat at the head of the long table, and the sight of him in full daylight made her steps falter. He'd been devastating in the forest, but here, in his element, he was absolutely lethal. Black shirt rolled to his elbows, dark hair still slightly damp from a shower, golden eyes that tracked her movement with predatory intensity. Power radiated from him like heat from a forge. He stood immediately, the movement fluid despite his size. Irina. Her name in his mouth sounded like possession and prayer combined. Join us, he continued, gesturing to the empty chair at his right hand. Not at the far end of the table, not among the others. Right beside him, the position of highest honor. Please. Every eye in the room watched as she crossed to him. The wolves at the table were all alpha stock. She could tell from their bearing, from the way they held themselves. Powerful males and females who commanded respect in their own territories. And they were all staring at her with expressions ranging from curiosity to calculation. Jet pulled out her chair personally, his hand brushing her lower back as she sat. The casual touch sent electricity racing up her spine, and from the slight curve of his mouth, he knew exactly what effect he had on her. Everyone, Jet said, his voice carrying easily despite its conversational tone. This is Irina, my mate. The words hung in the air like a declaration of war. A female with silver-shot hair and sharp green eyes leaned forward, her smile predatory. Alpha King, you honor us with this introduction. I'm Alpha Vera of the Western Reaches. We've heard rumors about your claiming. I'm sure you have. Jet's hand settled on the back of Irina's chair, possessive and unmistakable. Feel free to carry back confirmation to whoever sent you to spy. Irina is mine. The mate bond has claimed us both. Anyone who challenges that will answer to me personally. The threat beneath the pleasant words made several alphas shift uncomfortably. No challenge intended, a male across the table said quickly. He was younger, with bronze skin and nervous hands. Alpha Thomas, Southern Ridge Pack. It's just unexpected. You've refused every mate prospect for years. Because none of them were her. Jet's eyes found Irina's, and the intensity in them made her breath catch. I knew the moment I saw her. Everything before was just waiting. Irina's cheeks heated under the weight of his gaze, under the scrutiny of the gathered alphas. She reached for her water glass to give her hands something to do, and Jet immediately shifted the pitcher closer, refilling it before she could do it herself. The small gesture of care didn't go unnoticed. She saw Vera's eyes narrow, saw calculation spark in the female alpha's expression. "Tell me, Irina," Vera said, her tone carefully light. "What pack do you hail from? Your scent is unfamiliar." The question was a trap. Irina knew it, felt it in her bones. Admitting she was from Silver Hollow would invite questions about why she'd fled, about the twins, about everything she wanted to leave behind. But Jet's hand moved to her shoulder, warm and grounding. "Irina's past is her own business," he said coolly. "Her future is what matters. And that future is here, with me, as my mate and queen." Queen. The word resonated through the room like a bell. "You move quickly, my lord," Thomas said carefully. "A royal mating requires preparation, ceremony, the gathering of— The gathering of what? Permission?" Jet's voice dropped to dangerous levels. "I am the Alpha King. I don't require anyone's approval for who I claim as mate. The bond is sealed. The choice is made. Everything else is just politics, and I'm done playing political games with my personal life." The absolute authority in his voice left no room for argument. Irina felt something unfurl in her chest. Not just attraction, but genuine admiration. He wielded power like a weapon, but he used it to protect, rather than control. At least with her. The breakfast continued with careful conversation, alphas treading lightly around topics that might offend their host. Irina mostly listened, learning the landscape of pack politics she'd been blissfully ignorant of back in Silver Hollow. The territories Jet commanded were vast, his influence reaching into dozens of smaller packs who swore fealty in exchange for his protection and resources. He was more than an Alpha King. He was the wolf equivalent of an emperor, and he'd claimed her. Throughout the meal, Jet's attention never strayed far. He'd refill her glass before she emptied it, pass dishes before she reached for them, deflect questions that came too close to invasive. The care was subtle, but constant, and despite her determination to remain independent, Irina found herself leaning into it. When the visiting alphas finally departed, with promises to return for the formal claiming ceremony Jet assured them would happen, despite his dismissal of political necessities, Irina released a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. "That was intense," she murmured. Jet's hand found hers on the table, his fingers threading through hers with devastating gentleness. "You handled it perfectly. Vera was testing you, looking for weakness. You gave her nothing. Because I said almost nothing. Sometimes silence is the strongest response." He lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles that sent heat pooling in her belly. "You don't have to prove anything to them, Irina. You're my mate. That's all the credentials you need." The casual certainty in his voice made her throat tight. He spoke of their mating as inevitable, absolute, when she carried secrets that could shatter everything. The baby growing inside her, his baby, though he didn't know it yet, pressed against her bladder. A constant reminder of complications she couldn't avoid much longer. "Jet, I need to tell you." "Later." His thumb traced circles on her palm. "Right now, I want to show you something. Will you come with me?" She should refuse, should create distance, should find a way to explain before this went any further. But his golden eyes held hope, and something softer, more vulnerable, and she couldn't bring herself to crush it. "Show me," she said. He led her through the fortress, up spiral staircases and along corridors that grew progressively older, the stone rougher and the architecture more ancient. They emerged onto a balcony that overlooked a private courtyard, and Irina gasped. Below, young wolves played under the supervision of patient adults. Children, some barely able to hold their shifted forms, tumbled over each other with the chaotic joy of youth. A small Omega sat apart, reading, while two older pups practiced combat forms. The keep isn't just my home, Jet said quietly. It's sanctuary for any wolf who needs it. Orphans from rogue attacks, refugees from pack conflicts, wolves who don't fit their birth packs. They're all welcome here, all protected. Irina watched as Jet's expression softened as he observed the children with something like paternal pride. This was the king stripped of his armor, the male beneath the power. He cared deeply for those weaker than himself. It's beautiful, she whispered. I want to give you everything, Jet said, turning to face her. He cupped her face in his hands, and the tender intensity in his expression stole her breath. Not just wealth or power or titles. I want to give you safety, belonging, a home where you never have to be afraid or make impossible choices or face cruelty alone. I want, his voice roughened, I want to be worthy of you. Tears burned Irina's eyes. Jet, I know you're scared. I can sense it through the bond, even if it's still new. You're hiding something, and it's tearing you apart. His thumbs brushed away tears she hadn't realized were falling. When you're ready to tell me, I'll listen. Whatever it is, we'll face it together. That's what mates do. The urge to confess everything nearly overwhelmed her, but fear held her tongue. Fear that he'd reject her once he knew. Fear that the pregnancy complicated everything. Fear that she'd finally found something perfect and was about to destroy it with truth. I need time, she managed. Then take it. He pressed his forehead to hers, the gesture intimate and grounding. I've waited months to find you again. I can wait a little longer for you to trust me. They stood like that, breathing each other in, the mate bond humming between them like a living thing. Below, the children's laughter rose on the morning air. Around them, Blackstone Keep stood strong and immovable. And Irina felt for the first time since discovering her pregnancy, like maybe, just maybe, everything might actually be okay. That night, lying in the massive bed in her borrowed chamber, she let her hand rest on her still small belly. 3.5 months along now, and soon the pregnancy would become obvious to anyone with eyes. She'd tell Jet tomorrow. She'd find the courage and the words, and she'd trust that what they were building could withstand the truth. Tomorrow, she promised her unborn child. Tomorrow, everything would change. The attack came at midnight, 3 days later. Irina had spent those days in a haze of growing comfort and deepening attraction. Jet courted her with a patience that seemed at odds with his dominant nature. Walks through the fortress gardens, quiet dinners in his private chambers, conversations that stretched into the early morning hours. He made her laugh with dry observations about alpha politics. He listened with genuine interest when she talked about her childhood, carefully steering clear of recent history that still hurt too much to share. The pregnancy remained her secret, though hiding it grew harder each day. Her clothes fit more tightly. Her appetite had become ravenous. The healer, Mira, had examined her at Jet's insistence after her collapse, but Irina had managed to convince the older woman to keep her confidence. "Give me a week," she'd begged, "just one more week to find the right moment." Mira had agreed reluctantly, but her knowing eyes held warning. Time was running out. Irina was returning from the bathing chambers, hair still damp and skin warm from the hot water, when she heard it. A scream that cut through the night's peace like a blade through silk. Her wolf surged forward instantly, instincts overriding thought. She ran toward the sound, bare feet silent on stone floors, following the scent of fear and blood to the eastern wing where the children's quarters were housed. The corridor was chaos. Two massive males, rogues from their wild scent and scarred bodies, had a young Omega girl cornered, their intentions clear in their feral grins. Behind them, more rogues fought with Jet's warriors, the sounds of combat echoing off the walls. Irina didn't think. She shifted partially, claws extending, and threw herself at the nearest rogue. Her attack was fueled by maternal instinct, by fury at predators threatening a child, by months of suppressed rage finally finding an outlet. Her claws raked across his back, drawing blood and a howl of pain. The rogue spun, faster than something his size should move, and his backhand caught her across the ribs with enough force to send her crashing into the wall. Pain exploded through her side, stealing her breath. She tasted copper, blood from where she'd bitten her tongue. But the Omega girl ran, slipping past while the rogues were distracted, and that was all that mattered. Well, well, a familiar voice drawled. The runaway returns to consciousness. Dane stepped from the shadows, Marcus at his side, and Irina's blood turned to ice. The twins looked worse than when she'd seen them at the border. Gaunt, desperate, with the hollow eyes of wolves who'd lost everything and had nothing left to lose. "You cost us everything," Marcus snarled, advancing on her. "The council blamed us for your escape, stripped our ranks, our father's legacy, destroyed because you couldn't just choose like you were supposed to." Irina tried to stand, but her ribs screamed protest. Something was broken. Maybe multiple somethings. "This is insane. You can't just— Can't what? Take what belongs to us?" Dane's smile was twisted. Wrong. "You're carrying a child, Irina. We heard the rumors. The king's healer talks too freely with the servants. That baby is our ticket back to power. We'll claim it's one of ours. Silver Hollow will have to acknowledge us as fathers to the Alpha King's mate's child. The political leverage alone. The child isn't yours." The words ripped from her throat, desperate and furious. "It has nothing to do with you. Doesn't matter what's true. Matters what we can make others believe." Marcus reached for her, and Irina lashed out with her claws, catching his arm. He cursed, grabbing her wrist and twisting until she heard something pop, until agony whited out her vision. Then the temperature in the corridor dropped 10 degrees, and every wolf froze. Jet stood at the corridor's end, and he was absolutely terrifying. His eyes glowed pure gold, his wolf visible just beneath his skin, his power pressing against the air until it was hard to breathe. Blood covered his hands and forearms, not his blood, from the casual way he flexed his fingers. "Get away from her." Each word carried the weight of absolute authority, of primal dominance that made even Irina's wolf want to bare her throat in submission. Dane was either suicidal or too desperate to care. "She's carrying." Jet moved. 1 second he was at the corridor's end. The next he had Dane by the throat, lifting the twin off the ground with one hand. The casual display of strength was somehow more terrifying than overt violence. "You attempted to infiltrate my home. You brought rogues into my territory. You threatened my mate." Jet's voice was barely recognizable, more beast than man. "You put your hands on what belongs to me." "The child," Marcus tried, backing away, "is none of your concern." Jet's grip tightened, and Dane's face turned purple. "You want to know what happens to wolves who touch my mate? Who threaten what's mine?" What happened next would haunt Irina's dreams for weeks. Jet's claws extended fully, and he drove them through Dane's chest with surgical precision. The twins' eyes went wide, shock and pain and the beginning of death clouding them. When Jet withdrew his hand, Dane's heart came with it, still beating weakly. The body dropped like a puppet with cut strings. Marcus tried to run. Jet caught him before he made it 3 steps. And the execution was even faster. A single strike that nearly decapitated him. So quick Marcus probably didn't even feel it. The corridor fell silent except for Irina's ragged breathing and the drip of blood hitting stone. Jet turned to her, and for a moment she thought he'd lost himself completely to his beast. but his eyes found hers, and humanity returned in fractured pieces. He crossed to her in 2 strides, his bloody hands hovering over her body as if afraid to touch her and cause more damage. "You're hurt," he said, and his voice cracked. "Your ribs, your wrist, your—" The baby. Irina's hand moved to her stomach, terror overwhelming pain. "Please, the baby. Mira!" Jet's roar echoed through the fortress. "Healer, now!" Cormac appeared at the corridor's end, taking in the carnage with barely a flinch. "Sir, the rogues are eliminated. We have 2 casualties, neither fatal. The children are all safe. Get Mira, immediately." Jet's attention never left Irina, his hands finally settling on her shoulders with devastating gentleness. "Hold on. Just hold on. Help is coming." The healer arrived within minutes, her aged face grave as she assessed Irina's injuries. Other wolves cleared the bodies, cleaned the blood, restored order to chaos with efficient horror. Irina barely registered any of it, focused entirely on the flutter of life in her belly that she might have imagined, but needed desperately to be real. "Cracked ribs, sprained wrist," Mira pronounced finally, "but the child—" She pressed her hand to Irina's stomach, closing her eyes in concentration. Her healing gift was legendary, allowing her to sense injuries and life forces most couldn't. "The child is strong, holding firm. You protected them well, throwing yourself into that wall rather than taking the hit full on to your stomach." The relief nearly broke Irina. Tears streamed down her face as Mira carefully wrapped her ribs, as gentle hands stabilized her wrist. She was dimly aware of Jet standing statue still a few feet away, of the absolute rigidity in his posture. "The pregnancy is approximately 15 weeks along," Mira continued, her voice carrying through the now quiet corridor. "The child appears healthy despite the trauma, but she needs rest, minimal stress, and out." Jet's voice cut through the healer's words like a blade. "Everyone out. Now." Mira's eyes widened. "My lord, she needs space, and I need answers, and everyone else needs to be somewhere else." The barely leashed violence in his tone left no room for argument. "Go, all of you." The corridor emptied with impressive speed. Cormac was the last to leave, shooting Irina a look that might have been sympathy before closing the door behind him. The silence that followed was suffocating. Irina watched Jet, watched the way his shoulders rose and fell with carefully controlled breathing, watched his hands clench and unclench at his sides. When he finally turned to look at her, the expression on his face made her heart crack. Betrayal, fury, and beneath it all, a hurt so raw it was almost physical. "Pregnant," he said, each syllable sharp as glass. 15 weeks. You've been carrying a child this entire time, and you said nothing. Not when I found you dying in the forest. Not when I brought you to my home. Not when I claimed you as my mate in front of the entire territory." "Jet? Whose child, Irina?" His voice dropped to lethal quiet. "Is it one of theirs? Is that why they came for you? Is that why you ran?" The accusation in his words felt like a physical blow. "No. God, no, I would never—" "Then whose?" The question emerged raw, desperate. "Because you've been keeping this secret like it's dangerous, and I need to know why. I need to know what I'm fighting for, what I'm protecting, who the father is so I can decide if I need to kill him or—" You idiot!" The words exploded from her, fueled by pain and fear and exhaustion. "It's yours. It's always been yours." Jet froze, his eyes going wide with shock. Around them, the very air seemed to still, holding its breath. "That night at the summer gathering," Irina continued, her voice breaking, "6 months ago, I woke up alone and I thought it meant nothing to you. I thought I was just another conquest, another nameless female in your bed. I didn't even know your name, didn't recognize you as the Alpha King. When I discovered I was pregnant, I was terrified. My pack found out, shamed me, called me reckless and irresponsible, and tears choked off her words. Jet's hand rose to his chest, pressing over his heart as if it physically hurt. His mouth moved wordlessly, shock rendering him uncharacteristically speechless. I was going to tell you, Irina whispered. I swear I was going to tell you. I just needed time to find the right words, the right moment. I was so afraid you'd reject me once you knew, that you'd think I was trying to trap you or claim your child to secure my position. I was afraid. Her voice broke completely. I was so afraid you'd look at me exactly the way you're looking at me right now, like I betrayed you. The silence stretched, endless and horrible. Then Jet turned and walked away, his footsteps echoing in the empty corridor, each one driving a stake deeper into Irina's heart. The door closed behind him with quiet finality, and Irina was alone, cradling her ribs and her unborn child and the shattered pieces of something beautiful that maybe she'd destroyed before it ever had a chance to fully bloom. 2 days, 48 hours of silence so complete it was its own kind of agony. Irina remained in her chambers, tended by Mira and visited by Cormac, who brought food she could barely eat and reports she didn't ask for. The injured ribs made breathing painful. The sprained wrist throbbed with every movement, but neither compared to the ache in her chest where the mate bond twisted with emotions not her own. Jet was furious, hurt, confused. The feelings bled through their connection, a constant reminder that he was close enough to sense, but far enough to avoid her completely. She tried to give him space, tried to respect his need to process. But as the second night fell and the loneliness threatened to crush her, Irina couldn't take it anymore. She needed air, needed distance from the chamber that felt increasingly like a gilded cage. The fortress was quiet as she made her way through its corridors, one arm wrapped around her still healing ribs. Guards nodded respectfully but didn't stop her. Jet's orders that she could go anywhere she wished apparently still stood, even if he wouldn't speak to her. She climbed stairs until she ran out of stairs to climb, emerging onto the fortress's highest ramparts. Wind whipped her hair around her face, carrying the scent of pine and snow and freedom. Above, stars scattered across the sky like diamonds on black velvet, and the moon hung full and silver, blessing the world with light. You shouldn't be up here, not with your injuries. Irina spun, her heart leaping into her throat. Jet leaned against the stone wall, partially hidden in shadow. How long had he been there? How long had she walked past him, unaware? I needed air, she said quietly. I was suffocating down there. I know. He stepped into the moonlight and her breath caught. He looked wrecked, dark circles under his eyes, hair disheveled as if he'd been running his hands through it, jaw shadowed with 2 days' worth of stubble. I've been avoiding you. It wasn't fair. I just needed time to think. I understand. Irina wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly cold despite her thick cloak. I should have told you immediately. You had a right to know. The baby, the pregnancy, all of it. You deserved honesty, and I gave you secrets instead. Jet crossed to her, his movements careful, as if approaching something wild and ready to bolt. When he stood directly before her, close enough that she could feel his body heat, he reached out slowly and placed his hand over her stomach. The touch was reverent, gentle, questioning. I remember that night, he said softly, his golden eyes finding hers in the darkness. Every second of it. The moment I saw you across the gathering fires, I felt something click into place, like I'd been searching for you my whole life without knowing it. When you left before dawn, it nearly destroyed me. I've had my warriors searching every pack, every territory, following rumors of a dark-haired female who disappeared after the gathering. His thumb moved in a slow circle over where their child grew. I never thought you might have been carrying consequences of that night. carrying proof of what we made together. Tears slid down Irina's cheeks, hot against her cold skin. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry I didn't tell you. That I ran. That I... Stop. Jet's free hand cupped her face, his thumb brushing away her tears. I'm the one who needs to apologize. I walked away when you needed me most. I let my hurt and pride override everything else. You were attacked, injured protecting a child while carrying one of your own, and I abandoned you to deal with the aftermath alone. His voice roughened with self-directed anger. I failed you. I failed as your mate. No, Irina whispered, covering his hand with hers. You needed time to process. I don't blame you for... You should. The intensity in his expression stole her breath. Because I made a vow the moment I found you in those woods. I swore to myself that I'd never let you face anything alone again, that I'd protect you and cherish you, and be worthy of the gift the fates gave me when they led me to you. And the first real test of that vow, I walked away. Jet. Our child, he continued, his hand pressing firmer against her stomach, possessive and awed. This is our child. Mine and yours. Part of the mate bond made flesh. The heir to everything I've built, everything I am. He dropped to his knees before her, pressing his forehead against her belly, his arms wrapping carefully around her hips. I swear on my life, on my throne, on every star in that sky, I will protect both of you. I will give this child a kingdom of peace and safety. I will be the father they deserve, and the mate you should have had from the beginning. Irina's hands buried themselves in his hair, her tears falling freely now. I was so afraid, she confessed. Afraid you'd reject us, that the pregnancy complicated everything, that I'd ruin what was building between us. Jet stood, pulling her carefully into his arms, mindful of her injuries. How did your pack respond? He asked quietly. When they discovered you were pregnant. The question opened wounds she'd tried to ignore. Irina pressed her face against his chest, breathing in his scent. Smoke and pine and something uniquely him. They were disgusted, horrified that I'd been reckless enough to lay with someone outside pack bonds. The council said I'd brought shame to my family's legacy, that the only way to salvage my position was to choose between the twins and let one of them claim the child as his own. Her voice dropped to barely audible. They were going to force me to give my baby to one of those monsters and pretend it was his. They were going to use my child as a political pawn. The growl that rumbled through Jet's chest was pure primal fury. His arms tightened incrementally, his wolf rising in response to the harm done to his mate. Silver Hollow, he said, each word dripping venom. They did this to you. They shamed you, threatened you, tried to steal our child. They didn't know it was yours? It doesn't matter. Jet pulled back enough to look at her, and the deadly promise in his eyes sent shivers down her spine. They hurt my mate, threatened my heir, made you feel like you had to run into the wilderness alone rather than accept their so-called protection. His hand cupped her face with devastating gentleness. Silver Hollow will answer for what they've done, but later. Right now, I need you to understand something. Irina held her breath, waiting. The child is mine. You are mine. Not as property or possessions, but as the most precious gifts I've ever been given. This baby will be heir to the Northern Territories, raised with love and power and every advantage I can provide. And you... His voice softened. You're not just my fated mate, Irina. You're going to be my queen, my partner. The female I wake up beside every morning for the rest of our very long lives. I'm nobody, she whispered. Just a pack wolf from Silver Hollow with no rank, no power, nothing special. You're everything. He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, the tip of her nose. You're brave enough to flee into the wilderness rather than compromise yourself. Strong enough to protect children while carrying your own. fierce enough to tell an Alpha King to his face that he's an idiot. A smile ghosted across his lips. And you're mine. That makes you the most special wolf in existence. Jet, stay with me, he murmured against her hair. Not as a refugee or a protected female or any other temporary arrangement. Stay as my mate, my queen, the mother of my children. His hand moved to her stomach again. Reverent. Starting with this one, let me give you everything you should have had from the beginning. Safety, home, a family that chooses you every day. The offer hung between them, beautiful and terrifying in equal measure. Everything Irina had run from Silver Hollow to protect, her freedom, her child, her autonomy, he was offering to preserve while adding security she'd never imagined. Say yes, Jet whispered. Please, Irina, let me prove I can be what you need. She pulled back enough to meet his eyes, to see the vulnerability beneath the dominant power, to witness the raw hope on his face. This male, this king, was offering her the world and asking for nothing in return except permission to keep her safe. How could she refuse? Yes, she breathed, and watched joy transform his expression. Yes, I'll stay. Yes to all of it. Jet's kiss was gentle despite the passion in it. Careful of her injuries, mindful of the child between them, but it carried promise of protection, partnership, and a future neither of them could have anticipated 3 months ago. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing heavily, Jet rested his forehead against hers. Tomorrow, I announce it formally. You as my queen, the child as my heir. Every pack in 3 territories will know that you're under my protection, that harming you means war with me. That will make enemies, Irina warned. Let it. His smile was predatory, dangerous, beautiful. I've been too diplomatic for too long. It's time the territories remember exactly who I am and what I'm capable of when properly motivated. And protecting you, our child, our future. That's all the motivation I need to burn the world down if necessary. They stood on the ramparts until dawn painted the sky in shades of rose and gold, talking quietly about the future, making plans, building dreams. And despite the injuries still healing, despite the enemies surely gathering, despite all the complications ahead, Irina felt hopeful for the first time since she'd discovered her pregnancy. She'd found her mate, her home, her forever. Now, all they had to do was survive what came next. The announcement reverberated across the territories like an earthquake. Within hours of Jet's formal declaration, made to his assembled warriors, and immediately dispatched by messengers to every pack within reach, news spread. The Alpha King had claimed a mate. She carried his heir. The bloodline would continue. For 2 days, congratulations poured in from allied packs, gifts arriving from wolves seeking to curry favor with the future queen. Irina tried to protest the attention, but Jet was immovable. She was his mate, carrying his child, and he'd show her off to anyone foolish enough to challenge his claim. Then, on the 3rd morning, Cormac burst into the breakfast room where Irina and Jet sat, his expression grim. Sir, we have a problem. The Shadow Alliance has sent an emissary. Jet's hand stilled on his coffee cup. The Shadow Alliance. He said the name like it tasted foul. What do those vultures want? To talk. Under flag of truce. Cormac's jaw tightened. They're requesting a formal hearing. Something about justice for the deaths of Dane and Marcus. Ice flooded Irina's veins. She'd heard whispers about the Shadow Alliance, a coalition of alphas who resented Jet's power, who'd been quietly building their forces for years, waiting for any crack in his armor. Apparently, they'd found one. The emissary arrived at noon, escorted by 4 warriors who radiated tension. He was a thin male with sharp features and calculating eyes, his movements precise and practiced. Alpha King, he said, bowing with just enough respect to avoid insult. I bring greetings from the Shadow Alliance Council and a message regarding recent events. Speak, Jet commanded, his tone flat and dangerous. The emissary produced a sealed scroll, handing it to Cormac, who passed it to Jet. As the king read, his expression grew progressively darker, fury tightening his features. When he finally looked up, his eyes blazed gold. They demand I surrender Irina for their judgment. Claim she's responsible for the deaths of 2 alpha-blooded wolves and must face consequences. He crumpled the scroll, his claws extending. They threaten war if I refuse. Irina's breath caught. What? The twins were members of Silver Hollow, the emissary said smoothly, as if discussing weather. Their deaths occurred in your territory, Alpha King, while attempting to retrieve a packmate who fled unlawfully. The Alliance believes their deaths warrant investigation. They request the female be surrendered to neutral territory for questioning and potential trial. Absolutely not. Jet's voice could have frozen flames. Get out. Tell your masters that if they want my mate, they can try to take her. But they'll have to go through me, my warriors, and every wolf loyal to my crown. Now leave before I forget the rules of diplomatic immunity. The emissary fled, his warriors scrambling after him. In the silence that followed, Irina felt the weight of consequences crashing down. This was her fault. Her past had brought war to Jet's doorstep, endangered his kingdom, threatened everything he'd built. I have to leave, she said quietly. Jet spun to face her, fury transforming to disbelief. What? They're using me against you, threatening war because I'm here. Irina stood, her decision crystallizing with painful clarity. If I'm gone, they have no grounds for their demands. You can... No. Jet crossed to her in 3 strides, gripping her shoulders. Absolutely not. You're not going anywhere. We face this together. People will die, Jet. Your people. Because of me. Tears burned her eyes. I won't let you sacrifice your kingdom for my mate? For my child? There's nothing I wouldn't sacrifice for you. Nothing. His hands cupped her face, forcing her to meet his eyes. We're stronger together, Irina. Whatever comes, we face it side by side. She wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that love and determination could overcome political maneuvering and the threat of war. But fear for him, for their child, for the wolves who'd shown her kindness overrode everything else. That night, as Jet slept beside her, exhausted from hours of strategy meetings, Irina stared at the ceiling and made the hardest choice of her life. She'd once fled to protect her child from Silver Hollow's manipulation. Now she'd flee again to protect the male she loved from war, even if it destroyed them both. The guard who let her out was named Pavel, a younger wolf who'd shown her kindness during her weeks at Blackstone. He believed her story about needing air, about the pregnancy making her restless. By the time he realized his mistake, she was already beyond the fortress walls, swallowed by the forest darkness. Irina left only one thing behind: a letter, placed carefully on her pillow, where Jet would find it come dawn. I'm sorry. I love you. Protect our child by letting me go. Don't follow. Please. The words were inadequate, but they were all she had. As she ran through the darkness, her hand protective over her stomach, tears streaming down her face, Irina heard it. A howl that split the night, anguished and furious, and filled with such pain it physically hurt. Jet had found her letter, and the sound of his broken heart echoed across the mountains. The howl still echoed in Irina's ears 3 days later, a phantom sound that haunted her waking moments and invaded her dreams. She'd put 50 miles between herself and Blackstone Keep, moving through forests and over mountains with the desperate speed of prey, fleeing a predator. Except the predator she fled was the only wolf in the world she actually wanted to find her. Don't follow, she'd written, as if Jet had ever taken orders from anyone. The bond between them pulled like a rope tied around her heart, growing tighter with each mile she traveled. She could feel his fury through it, his determination, his absolute refusal to accept her sacrifice. But distance muted the connection enough that she couldn't hear his thoughts, couldn't sense his exact location. Small mercies. Whispering Pines territory appeared on the fourth day of her flight. A remote region she'd only heard about in passing, known for harboring wolves who preferred isolation to politics. The forest here grew dense and ancient, trees so tall they blocked out the sun, their branches thick with moss that hung like tattered curtains. Perfect for disappearing. Irina found a small cave carved into a hillside, sheltered by overhanging roots and hidden behind a waterfall that muffled sound. She gathered what supplies she could: berries, edible roots, water from the stream. Her pregnancy made everything harder, the constant fatigue pulling at her bones, but she pushed through it. Survival wasn't optional anymore. That night, curled in her makeshift shelter with one hand protective over her swollen belly, Irina felt the first surge. Power, raw and unfamiliar, flooded through her veins like liquid fire. Her wolf surged forward unbidden, stronger than she'd ever felt it, demanding release. Irina gasped, her back arching as energy crackled across her skin. For a terrifying moment, she thought something was wrong with the baby, that the stress had triggered early labor. Then the power settled, sinking into her bones with a rightness that made her breath catch. What was that? She'd never felt anything like it. This overwhelming strength, this primal certainty of dominance. It was as if something dormant had awakened, responding to the child growing inside her, or perhaps to the danger she'd fled. Sleep came fitfully, haunted by dreams of silver wolves and ancient battles, of a female with her face wearing a crown of moonlight and commanding armies, with nothing but her voice. The assassins came on the fifth day. Irina was gathering water when she scented them, 4 wolves, moving with the practiced silence of trained killers. Shadow Alliance, from the uniform scars on their faces that marked them as belonging to the Coalition's elite forces. They'd tracked her somehow, followed her trail despite her precautions. Fear spiked through her, sharp and overwhelming. She was alone, pregnant, still healing from injuries sustained at Blackstone. 4 trained warriors against 1 exhausted female. The odds were impossible. Run! Her logical mind screamed. But where? They'd already found her. Running would only delay the inevitable, and the chase might harm the baby. So Irina did something she'd never done before. She stopped running and stood her ground. The lead assassin stepped into the clearing, his smile cruel. There you are. The Shadow Alliance sends its regards. Nothing personal, but your child threatens the balance of power. Can't have the Alpha King producing an heir that could unite the territories under one crown. You're making a mistake, Irina said, her voice steadier than she felt. Killing me won't stop Jet. It'll only make him more dangerous. Maybe, but you'll be too dead to care. He lunged, claws extended, and Irina's wolf exploded forward. The shift was instantaneous, smoother than it had ever been, her body flowing from human to wolf with liquid grace. But the wolf that emerged wasn't the ordinary gray-brown she'd always been. Silver. Her fur shone like moonlight, bright enough to make the assassins stumble back in shock. Power radiated from her body, pressing against the air, making the trees bend away as if in deference. The lead assassin's eyes widened. Impossible. The Luna bloodline died out. Irina didn't let him finish. She attacked with strength she didn't know she possessed, her jaws closing around his throat before he could defend himself. The taste of his blood filled her mouth as she tore, primal and efficient. He dropped, gurgling, already dying. The other 3 recovered from their shock, spreading out to flank her. But Irina's new instincts guided her movements, ancient knowledge flowing through her blood. She was faster than them, stronger, her enhanced abilities making their attacks seem slow and clumsy by comparison. She caught the second assassin with her claws, raking across his chest deep enough to expose bone. The third got close enough to bite her shoulder, but she twisted, throwing him into a tree with enough force that she heard something crack. The fourth tried to run. She hunted him down within seconds, her powerful legs eating up distance as if he were standing still. When the last assassin fell, Irina stood in the clearing, panting, covered in blood that mostly wasn't hers. Her silver fur gleamed in the dappled sunlight, beautiful and terrible. Then the pain hit, cramping, sharp and overwhelming, doubled her over. Irina shifted back to human form, gasping, her hands flying to her stomach. Too early. The baby wasn't due for weeks yet, but the stress of the fight, the surge of power, something had triggered labor. No, she whimpered, dropping to her knees. Not yet. Please. Not yet. It's too soon. Easy, child. Irina's head snapped up. An elderly female stood at the clearing's edge, leaning on a gnarled walking stick, her eyes ancient and knowing. Silver hair hung to her waist, and power clung to her like a cloak. Different from Irina's raw strength, more subtle but no less potent. Who? Another contraction stole her breath. Yara, wise woman of Whispering Pines pack. The old woman moved forward, surprisingly spry despite her apparent age. I felt your awakening 3 days ago, felt the Luna bloodline stir for the first time in 1,000 years, been waiting for you to reveal yourself. Her weathered hand touched Irina's forehead, cool and soothing. But we need to get you somewhere safe. The baby's coming. Ready or not. It's too early. Royal bloodlines make their own schedule. Yara helped Irina to her feet, supporting her weight. Come. My den is close. We'll bring this child into the world properly, with the old ceremonies and protections. The heir deserves no less. Through the haze of pain and fear, Irina let herself be led deeper into the forest, to a hidden den carved into the earth itself. Other wolves appeared. Whispering Pines pack members who moved with quiet efficiency, preparing a birthing space with soft furs and heated stones, brewing teas that smelled of herbs and ancient magic. Labor lasted 12 hours. 12 hours of agony and exhaustion, of pushing and bleeding and praying to gods she'd forgotten how to name. Yara stayed beside her the entire time, her voice a constant anchor, guiding Irina through each contraction. The Luna bloodline awakens only when necessary, Yara murmured during a brief respite between contractions. Your maternal ancestors carried the blood of the first Luna Queen, diluted over generations until it became dormant. But this child... Her hand rested on Irina's swollen belly. This child is different. Royal blood on both sides. Alpha King and Luna Queen. The prophecy made flesh. What prophecy? Irina gasped. That one day, when the territories stood on the brink of war, when power threatened to consume rather than protect, the first pure royal bloodline in 1,000 years would be born. A child who could unite all packs under one crown, who carried the strength of the Alpha and the wisdom of the Luna. Yara's eyes gleamed. Your son, Irina. He's the prophesied heir. Another contraction hit. This one different, urgent, demanding, final. Push, Yara commanded. Now, child. Bring him into this world. Irina bore down with everything she had left, her silver wolf lending her strength, her love for Jet and their unborn child giving her purpose. She pushed until her vision went white, until she thought she'd tear apart, until... A cry, small and furious and absolutely perfect. A son, Yara breathed, her voice filled with awe. A healthy, strong son. The wise woman cleaned the baby with practiced hands, then placed him on Irina's chest. He was tiny, wrinkled, covered in vernix, and absolutely the most beautiful thing she'd ever seen. Dark hair like his father's crowned his small head, and when he opened his eyes, they were golden, pure, brilliant gold. "Hello," Irina whispered, tears streaming down her face. "I'm your mother. And your father is the strongest wolf alive, and he's going to find us soon, and—" Her voice broke. "I'm so sorry I couldn't give you a safer world to be born into." The baby, her son, made a small sound, his tiny hand wrapping around her finger with surprising strength. Through the bond, distant but growing stronger, she felt Jet. He was closer now, much closer, and his emotions blazed like fire, determination, fury, and beneath it all, unwavering love. "He's coming," Yara said quietly, as if reading her thoughts. "Your mate. He refused to accept your sacrifice. The entire territory speaks of nothing else. How the Alpha King stormed the Shadow Alliance's neutral ground 3 days ago. How he challenged their authority and demanded they face him in ritual combat." Irina's head snapped up. "He what?" "Defeated them. All of them. 6 Alliance Alphas, each one forced to submit or die. He exposed their true goal, eliminating the heir that threatens their power balance, made them swear fealty or face extinction." The old woman smiled. "He declared before every witness that you are his queen, your child is his heir, and anyone who threatens either of you declares war on him personally. Then he set out to find you, following the mate bond despite the distance." Fresh tears spilled down Irina's cheeks. She'd fled to protect him from war, and he'd brought war directly to his enemy's doorstep to protect her. "I'm coming for you." His voice suddenly whispered through the bond, clear as if he spoke aloud. "You are mine. Our child is mine. No one takes what belongs to the king." "He's close," Yara said, standing. "But so are they." The Shadow Alliance didn't accept defeat gracefully. They've sent their remaining forces here, following the same trail your mate follows. They mean to kill you and the child before he arrives. As if summoning them with her words, howls erupted in the distance. Not greeting calls, war cries, filled with violence and deadly intent. The Shadow Alliance had come for their final assault. Jet felt the moment Irina's labor began, the echo of her pain reverberating through their bond with enough force to make him stumble. Cormac caught his arm, steadying him, his expression questioning. "She's in labor," Jet growled, his wolf surging forward, demanding he move faster, find his mate, protect his child. "Now. The baby's coming now." "We're still 5 miles out." "Then we run." Jet shifted mid-stride, his wolf form massive and dark, built for power rather than speed, but driven by desperation to reach his mate. Behind him, his elite warriors shifted as well, 30 of the strongest wolves in 3 territories following their king into potential battle. They'd been tracking Irina for 5 days, ever since Jet had dealt with the Shadow Alliance leadership. The fight had been brutal, but necessary. 6 alphas who thought their coalition made them untouchable, who'd threatened his mate and heir. Jet had torn through them with methodical efficiency, challenging each one individually to ensure no one could claim he'd used numbers to his advantage. He'd given them the honor of ritual combat, even though they deserved nothing but execution. 3 had submitted, swearing fealty to avoid death. 2 had chosen to die fighting. The last, a male named Cross who'd led the coalition, had fled before Jet could finish him. Coward's fate. Jet would hunt him eventually, but Irina took priority over revenge. Through the bond, he felt her fear, her pain, her desperate love for their child. He pushed himself harder, his paws eating up distance, his wolf lending him strength beyond normal limits. "Hold on," he sent through the bond, praying she could hear him. "I'm coming. Just hold on." The scent of blood hit him 2 miles from Whispering Pines territory. Not Irina's blood, but others. Fresh kills, recently dead. His warriors spread out automatically, securing the perimeter as Jet investigated the clearing. 4 bodies, all bearing Shadow Alliance markers, all killed by the same wolf, from the consistency of wounds and fighting style. But the most shocking detail was the silver fur caught on nearby branches, glinting in the fading light. "Sir," Cormac said quietly, examining the ground, "these tracks, they're massive, larger than any female wolf should be." Jet knew what it meant, knew what silver fur signified, what power could transform an ordinary wolf into something legendary. "Luna bloodline," he breathed, awe replacing fury for a moment. "She's descended from the Luna Queens. That makes your child everything the prophecy foretold." Jet's chest swelled with pride and possessive satisfaction. His mate was royalty, his child the heir of two ancient bloodlines. Which means every wolf who wants to prevent the unification of territories will be hunting them. As if his words were prophecy themselves, howls rose in the distance, coordinated, organized, deadly. Shadow Alliance forces converging on Whispering Pines from multiple directions. Jet threw back his head and howled his answer, a challenge and promise combined. "Touch my mate and die. Touch my child and I'll erase your bloodline from existence." Then he ran, his warriors flanking him, racing toward the battle that would decide everything. They found Whispering Pines territory in chaos. Shadow Alliance wolves poured through the forest, at least 50 of them, clearly intent on overwhelming the small pack through sheer numbers. But Whispering Pines wolves fought with surprising ferocity, defending something precious in their territory's heart, defending his mate. Jet hit the battle line like a hurricane, his massive form bowling over 3 Alliance wolves before they could react. His jaws closed around the throat of a fourth, tearing through flesh and cartilage with brutal efficiency. Behind him, his warriors crashed into the enemy forces with coordinated precision, trained fighters against desperate assassins. The tide turned immediately. Jet fought his way toward the center of Whispering Pines territory, following the bond that pulled him toward Arena with magnetic force. Alliance wolves tried to stop him. He destroyed them without slowing down. Claws, teeth, raw power. He used everything, painting the forest floor with blood and bodies. Then he saw it, a hidden den carved into the earth, protected by a ring of Whispering Pines warriors who were clearly losing ground against superior numbers. And standing in the den's entrance, holding a bundle wrapped in soft fur, was Irina. She'd shifted back to human form, her silver hair disheveled, her body still showing signs of recent labor. But her eyes blazed with power, with fierce maternal protection, with the absolute certainty of a queen defending her heir. "You will not touch him," she snarled at the advancing Alliance wolves. "I am Irina of the Luna bloodline, mate to the Alpha King, and this is my son. Anyone who wants him goes through me." Silver light erupted from her body, raw and overwhelming, pressing against the Alliance wolves with enough force to make them stagger. Jet felt it through the bond, the awakened power of her heritage, amplified by her love and desperation. His mate was magnificent. Jet shifted to human form, striding forward to stand beside her, his own power rising to meet hers. The moment they touched, his hand finding her waist, pulling her against his side, their combined strength exploded outward. The bond between them became visible, silver and gold light arcing between their bodies, creating a barrier of pure power that forced every Alliance wolf to their knees. Those who tried to resist found themselves physically unable to move, their wolves submitting involuntarily to the authority of true royalty. "The Alpha King and the Luna Queen," an elderly female breathed, Yara, from the reverence in her tone and the power clinging to her. "The prophecy is fulfilled." Jet looked at Irina, at the fierce love and relief warring on her face, and his heart swelled to breaking. "Show me," he whispered. "Show me our son." She pulled back the fur wrapping, revealing a tiny face with his features, and her delicate bone structure. Golden eyes, pure gold, marking him as Alpha-born, blinked up at Jet with infant curiosity. "He's perfect," Jet breathed, his hand gently touching his son's small head. "You're both perfect." The baby made a small sound, and Jet's wolf recognized its own, claiming the child with absolute certainty. "Mine, my son, my heir." Around them, the battle died. Alliance forces that hadn't fled were pinned by the power radiating from the bonded mates, unable to do anything but submit or die. Jet's warriors secured the perimeter, rounding up survivors with efficient brutality. "It's over," Cormac said quietly, approaching with blood staining his fur. "The remaining Alliance forces are scattered. Leadership is dead or submitted. Shadow Alliance no longer exists as a threat." Jet nodded, but his attention never left Irina and their son. "You ran," he said softly, his hand cupping her face. "You left to protect me. They threatened war. So I brought them war." His thumb brushed her cheek. "Did you really think I'd let you face this alone? That I'd choose peace over you? Politics over our child?" Tears spilled down her face. "I was trying to keep you safe. And I was trying to keep you." He kissed her forehead, gentle despite the violence still clinging to him. "We're mates, Irina. That means we're stronger together than apart. It means I'd burn the world down before I'd let anything harm you or our son. It means—" His voice roughened with emotion. "It means you're never running from me again. Understand?" She nodded, leaning into him, their son cradled between them. Through the bond, Jet felt her exhaustion, her relief, her overwhelming love. "Take us home," she whispered. "Please, take us home." Jet swept them both into his arms, cradling his entire world against his chest. His warriors formed a protective escort as they began the journey back to Blackstone Keep, the rising sun painting the sky in shades of gold and promise. The prophecy was fulfilled. The territories were united under one crown, and the Alpha King finally had everything that mattered: his queen, his heir, and a future worth fighting for.